fasting, and pilgrimage. These became what are known today as the 5 pillars of Islam. The first pillar is the simple declaration of faith, known as the Shahadah.
I testify that there is no God other than God, and I testify that Muhammad is his messenger.
These simple words lie at the heart of Islam. They are whispered into the ear of every newborn Muslim child and linger on the lips of the dying. They have been the subject of Islamic poets and calligraphers down through the ages. To convert to Islam, one must only say the Shahadah once with sincerity.
So that's the first pillar, simply the utterance of that testament of faith. The second pillar is praying 5 times a day.
Called the Salah, these ritual prayers are said while facing the city of Mecca. They are observed at 5 specific times each day: at dawn, midday, in the afternoon, at sunset, and in the evening before going to sleep.
It acts as a constant reminder, a constant engagement with the divine.
For me, prayer is an act of checking out of my life, getting focused, and returning back to my life in a better and purer state.
Cleansing, whether merely symbolic or a full ritual bath, is required to enter into a state of communion with God. The environment for prayer must be clean as well. A prayer rug keeps the faithful from contact with the unclean ground.
The way that we begin our prayer is by throwing our hands up over our shoulders and saying Allahu Akbar, which is God is greater, meaning that God is more majestic and more powerful than anything that we know, and by throwing our cares away in some ways also.
But no matter what country one prays in, the prayers themselves are always spoken in Arabic, believed to be the immutable word of God as revealed to Muhammad by the angel Gabriel. They have remained unchanged since first spoken in the 7th century AD. At that time, Muhammad's revelations and their message of a single true God offended many and soon began to divide the tribe of the Quraysh. It would bring civil war to the sands of Arabia. By the year 622 AD, Muhammad and his small community of Muslims were preaching their religion openly on the streets of Mecca. But their actions soon angered the idol worshippers and the tribal elders of the Quraysh.
There were idols all around the Kaaba and in the enclosure in Mecca. And they would have annual festivals also where people would come and they would have commerce there and trade and perform the pilgrimage, which was at that time connected with idol worship as well.
As hosts of the Kaaba, the Quraysh were embarrassed by Muhammad's sermons against those pilgrims who brought their tribal gods to its altar. So the Quraysh began a campaign of social and economic persecution of Muhammad and his followers.
The Meccans, first of all, targeted the poorer Muslims because these were the ones who belonged to minor or unimportant clans. And these did suffer a great deal.
To make matters worse, Muhammad's uncle died, leaving him without a strong political ally in Mecca.
After perhaps 10 years of preaching in Mecca, he had only a few tens of followers. And towards the end of his days in Mecca, he was very much an isolated individual.
Despite his troubles in Mecca, Muhammad's reputation as a fair and honest trader was known throughout the region. 260 miles to the north, the elders of the small oasis of Yathrib sent a message to Muhammad. The tribes of their city were locked in clannish disputes and blood feuds.
The people of Yathrib were interested in Muhammad because they wanted basically a peacekeeper, somebody who would arbitrate between them and settle their disputes.
And so, Muhammad accepted their offer and began a journey to Yathrib, known as the Hijjrah. A journey so important, it marks the year 0 in the Islamic lunar calendar.
Hijrah gave them birth and life, resurrected them, and the Prophet moved from a hostile environment into a place where he could freely preach his message.
In Yathrib, Muhammad set up the first planned community of Islam, called the Ummah, meaning community. He then set about making peace among the clans. So successful was Muhammad's leadership that the city soon changed its name from Yathrib to Medina, meaning City of the Prophet. But instead of peace, the Muslims of Medina soon faced open warfare. Enraged by Muslim gains, the Quraysh of Mecca responded by raising an enormous army to crush all those who worshipped Muhammad's God. The two sides faced each other at the Battle of Badr in 624.
The Meccan army was more than twice as large, maybe 3 times as large as the Muslim force there. And even so, the Muslims completely triumphed over the Meccan army.
But the conflicts continued over a period of 6 years. At one point, the Prophet himself was severely wounded. But finally, in 630 AD, the Muslims surrounded Mecca and forced its surrender. Muhammad at last returned to the city of his birth, heading an army of 10,000 men. Like the prophets of Judaism and Christianity before him, Muhammad's most important act was to cleanse Abraham's sacred temple of the idols that had ruled it for so long.
He came up to an icon of the Virgin and Child, and he covered it with his cloak, and he said, "Wash everything else, but keep this in place."
Muhammad then turned to the Meccans, who had made war against him. But instead of punishing them, he offered them their freedom on the condition they cease fighting. Not only did they lay down their arms, but Muhammad's gesture inspired many Meccans to embrace Islam. The next year, 631 AD, was called the Year of the Ambassadors for the many delegations from Arab tribes who came to pay tribute to the Prophet and to convert to Islam. 1 year later, on June 8th, 632, Muhammad died of fever. He was 62. At that time, Muslims controlled the entire Arabian Peninsula.
Within 15 years or so, the Muslims have acquired an empire. They became the superpower of the time.
There was a kind of a roller coaster of conquests.
Within a century, the Empire of Islam encompassed an area larger than that of Rome at its peak. It was ruled by the first royal dynasty of Islam, the Umayyads.
The Umayyads were a family of Meccan nobles before Islam who also became Muslims and became the rulers or caliphs or khalifas in Arabic after 661 until 750. And they presided over the Muslim state, its largest territorial extent from Morocco and Spain in the west to China and India in the east.
And with every conquest,